welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Yuriy Zaremba. Yuriy is a corporate lawyer turned CEO and 2 times Y Combinator alumni. He co-founded his first company, AxDraft, in 2017, which was acquired by Onit in 2020. He then co-founded AiSDR, where he serves today as the CEO. AiSDR creates and sends personalized sales emails at scale and automatically engages with prospects who respond. Tools like AiSDR spark a lot of conversation today because on one hand, they have the potential to make outbound prospecting significantly more cost efficient, but on the other hand, there's concern about what that means for the future of sales jobs and the human seller. In previous episodes, we've discussed the future of AI in sales and have speculated our thoughts on what's to come, but today we get to hear firsthand from the man who's actually building and selling this solution, and I'm excited to get your perspective. Yuriy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thanks for joining me. I've got a series of about 10 questions here. Since there's a lot to cover here, and I'm excited to hopefully get to cover all of these, let's dive right in. The first one that I want to talk about is sort of the elephant in the room, and I think it's good for us to get your thoughts on this first before we go a few layers deeper. So the question is, people are concerned about AI replacing human jobs. Now, I've shared my thoughts in previous episodes, so I won't go too much into sharing my own thoughts here, but generally speaking, I think that we are on sort of the precipice of that happening. I think it's undeniable that will happen. But I also think if we look historically, that it has already been happening for many decades in different ways. You know, one could argue that the invention of the wheel replaced humans who used to carry things, right? And so it really, no matter how far you go back, we've been replacing ourselves with tools. And so I don't think this is any different, with the exception that they refer to it as the moment of singularity, which is really where our tools are now becoming smarter and robotics-wise more physically capable than humans. And so that is different in the sense that there may be nothing for us to eventually move on to and do ourselves. And that's sort of the thought there. But let's stay sort of within the realm of sales today. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that as you're building out this solution. I imagine you've spent time thinking to yourself, am I doing the right thing here? Am I taking people's jobs away? There's got to be obviously a justification, so to speak, in your mind of how you view that and how you view the future of sales and jobs and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. I'll let you run with it in whatever direction you'd like to.
No, absolutely. So I'm not concerned about kind of sales role and kind of SDR jobs as part of the kind of AI revolution and AI SDR evolution. Because as you correctly mentioned, humans evolve all the time, right? Along with the evolution of technology. It's a bit more radical this time. It's happening a bit more faster this time. But overall, let's be honest, SDRs, right? Usually people just out of the university, entry-level job in sales, they take it, they go through it, but it's always a stepping stone to something bigger, right? To becoming an account executive, to actually talking to people, to actually closing deals. And in my experience, right, working for many companies and kind of managing sales processes for many companies, I've seen little passion and a lot of routine and automation in SDR jobs up until this moment as well, right? And essentially what we're doing is we're saying like, hey, you're not very happy like doing this. It's pretty automated already, right? Let's take it a notch further and allow you to focus on things where human interaction really matters, right? Like one-to-one calls, demos, actually selling and closing the deal, because people still buy from people, right? But getting to that meeting, this can be automated. Interestingly enough, I've had the same problem, same conversation with my first company, AxDraft, right? At that point, the question was like, you're automating creation of legal documents. What lawyers are going to do, right? Turns out they had a ton of things to do, right? They just made fewer mistakes creating standard templated legal documents. So humans will evolve, job roles will evolve, and will adapt to kind of this new reality of AI sales outreach. And as in any kind of profession, there is kind of mass market general approach where everyone is automating everything. And there is craftsmanship, right? So craftsmanship cannot be replaced with AI, right? Because it's very kind of hands-on, a lot of research, very kind of custom approach to every single account, but not everyone needs craftsmanship, right? And not everyone is a craftsman, right? So there will be evolution, but I do not believe that the SDR role will go away completely. I honestly don't, right? I believe that there will be kind of layering and segmentation for different market segments, for different kind of GTM strategies, different ACVs. And I also don't believe that people who are currently in SDR roles will lose jobs, because I believe they will transition into inside sales roles. Because imagine AI generating more pipeline. Who's going to be closing that pipeline? A random person from a street, or a person who has been working on this product for a couple of years already and knows the ins and outs?
Beautifully said. And I think that aligns very well with, I just spoke with Jocko Vanderkoy on one of my previous episodes, a couple episodes ago, and he shared the same sentiment, really, which is that it's not the right way to look at it to say AI is replacing humans or it's taking their jobs. It's actually replacing part of their process, right? It's replacing parts of the monotonous routine, perhaps, that really is inefficient to begin with. Another great example of this is the ATM, right? The automatic teller machine. When those came out, I would imagine that bank tellers were very scared of losing their jobs. And the reality is banks still have bank tellers. The argument that could be made is there's probably less. There's probably fewer bank tellers because they're able to become more efficient. They're able to have shorter lines inside of the bank because people can, meet with the machine outside and get what they need some of the time. And so I think it's the same thing that we're looking at here. And it probably could be said that the industry will have fewer salespeople as we get more efficient. But I don't think that that's the same as saying that it's taking people's jobs away. It's really just an evolution that we have continued to follow for all of human history, essentially. And I think the great way to look at it, I think it was Peter Diamandis who said this, I could be quoting incorrectly, but basically what they said is if we don't evolve, if we don't create tools that replace the jobs that we do, then we will be doing the same things forever. And that's a pretty boring reality to think about, especially to your point, is there's a lack of excitement about a lot of the jobs that we do as humans, right? Yeah. People are not excited to be hanging off the back of a garbage truck to pick up garbage from your house every morning. Well, now there's trucks that scoop up the bins and dump it right in. And that's great. Now that person can move on to doing something else. And part of that is just the nature of growing as a civilization, but it also opens doors. And so I do think there's downsides and there's moments of growth where it sort of shocks the system. And employment where it may have been in abundance at one point, it may decline, right? And we might be seeing the start of that a little bit with what's going to happen here in sales as we get more efficient and we use these tools. But ultimately what it does is it allows the industry to thrive. Because if there's one thing that we all could probably agree on, is that we've been spending too much money on sales and marketing. And that has created a massive sort of economic bubble within SaaS that is not sustainable forever. And so I sort of see these converging forces of AI and robotics entering the workforce at the same time that we're going through an economic downturn and we have to get more efficient. It's almost perfect timing, one could argue. So anyway, I promised I wouldn't throw too much of my own thoughts in there, but there's just a little taste on where I land on that for those who haven't listened to previous episodes. But let's jump into your thoughts on where we stand today. This is one of the ones I'm most excited to chat with you about because I have not personally used one of these tools yet. I've been watching you from afar, watching some of your competitors, paying attention to what's going on in the market, listening to what people are saying, but you're actually selling it, you're actually building it. So I want to hear from you, and I'm going to leave this kind of as a high level question, and again, let you go with it, wherever it takes you. But I think there's two ways to look at AI. One is, what is it capable of doing today versus where do we see it in the future? What do we think it's going to be able to do, in 5 to 10 years? So let's sort of break that into two questions. One being, what is it capable of today? And you can speak to AiSDR as well as the competition in the space, just where we're at today. And then you can jump into where do you see that going 5 to 10 years from now, or however far out you would like to go.
So speaking about kind of AiSDRs in generally, right? I believe AiSDRs are still not where kind of a really good human SDR can be because of the limitations that they have on channels, right? Although 11x recently kind of launched voice as well, but there are some legal concerns with fully automated LinkedIn outreach, some fully automated kind of call outreach. And the biggest question on that is whether we're going to do it anyway, because there is demand, and going to take the risk and manage it, and going to hope nobody's going to sue us. And then maybe just they will manage this on a platform level somehow. That may be the case for LinkedIn. Not sure it's going to be the case for the phone calls, right? Because it's a bit more sensitive in that sense. And by being limited, the multi-threading is not that efficient, because it does work better when you can write an email, give a call, write a LinkedIn. But where it fits really well is when you have a team of kind of inside sales reps, for example, that are full cycle. And because they are full cycle, they really kind of don't have time to do good prospecting because they spend time closing deals. And then deals run out because they didn't do good prospecting, and they start prospecting, but they don't have deals to close. And an AI SDR solution would be a perfect kind of assistant in that setup, because yes, maybe limited to kind of email only, for example, in our case, but it's going to do a good job end to end, delivering predictable pipeline to that AE on top of whatever he's doing himself or herself, multi-threading, and kind of balancing that better. In the future, right, in the very near future, I believe we already see kind of some players taking bets, right? So calls from 11x, right? I've also heard they're doing LinkedIn. Let's see what happens from the regulatory point of view. Because if they kind of pave that way and nothing bad happens, then everybody's going to do it, right? Then basically every AI SDR will be truly kind of multi-threading, doing kind of outreach, things like that. And then another kind of layer of problem is going to appear, which is what happens when the channels are overly saturated. And it's a very interesting problem that kind of nobody knows how it's going to resolve itself, right? So people who think that a human-assisted kind of AI approach is a solution, they're wrong, because they will be part of the game. They're just going to be doing less volume than the fully automated guys. So the question at that point of time is going to be how to get useful information from all the communication that you're receiving through all the channels. And I think what is likely to happen, and my version of the future, is that there will be a point where we'll get an AI buyer, essentially, like a software that kind of scans the channels, blocks everything you don't care about, but kind of gives you a summary of like, hey, here are the kind of 5 solutions that you should talk to because you're looking for this. And this is going to be the future of kind of B2B software sales, where we have kind of an AI pitch, right? Then we have an AI procurement, and then people talk to each other when there is a short list of 5.
Got it. Okay, so you hit on a lot of good stuff here. So to make sure I'm getting everything in my notes here and clarify. So first of all, you're saying today humans are still superior. There's still work to be done if we're going to get to the place of, AI being completely superior to humans. And I think that's to be expected at the stage that we're at today. I actually think that you're moving faster than I would have probably anticipated, which is promising. The legal concerns is the big one, and I'm glad you brought it up. We dealt a lot with this stuff at AirCall, just teaching people the laws around cold calling, different things like using local presence dialing, recording calls, one party or two party consent states, right? And there's been a lot of risk taken in that department in sales over the years. I would say not many of us have really paid much attention to following the laws. And it's not because we're out looking trying to break laws. It's mostly because if laws aren't enforced, they are ignored. And that's just the way that the legal system works. And on the phone call, on the cold calling side of things, I can speak to this a little bit from my experience at AirCall and just having bought so many phone systems over the years. They will often try to give you tools that will help you sort of comply with the law. Like maybe you're going to have a recording that asks them for consent to record or different things like this. But for the most part, no one's really taken it seriously using it because there has been such an abundance of violations of those laws that it is too costly to enforce. There's basically, you would need like an entire federal agency dedicated to just that. And it has obviously not been a priority. And so for that reason, unless you have a lot to lose from a class action lawsuit standpoint, then most companies don't take it seriously, which is why it's big companies that often do take it seriously and small startups. No one's going to start class action lawsuit for the most part against a startup that's got nothing to lose.
But it's very different in case of AI calling,
Yes.
right? So the federal agencies already let us know that like, hey, like we are more concerned about AI calls than about anything else. And then on top of that, it's like 10x easier to take action against an AI company because you have to like shut down one company and then like 10 million calls are
Right.
fixed forever, right?
And the problem can be that much bigger, right? So that's probably why they're trying to get a head start on this. Although I would imagine if we rewound time, I mean, I wasn't around, but I would imagine when all these cold calling scams, out of different countries and stuff really started, I would imagine they put the same level of scare tactic in place, but then they didn't follow through on enforcing it. I could be wrong. Like maybe they're really going to take this, from a different angle. And it's probably because the ability to scale it is so massive, right? If you're going to open up a call center, I don't know, in another country and, in Nigeria or in India, and you're going to start running scams or whatever calling into the US, it's a big problem, but it can really only be as big as you can hire more people. Whereas with AI, you can be calling every cell phone on the planet every minute if there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And that's a big problem, especially when you go down the road of sentiment analysis and the level of persuasion and sort of manipulation ability that AI will eventually have. It can fake your mother's voice. I mean, who knows where it can go with that type of stuff. So I do think you're right to be thinking about the legal risk. It is definitely for the next decade going to be getting a lot of attention. So whether they take their foot off the gas later is almost irrelevant, or is irrelevant to you today and to those who are in this space. Are you lobbying? Are you advocating? Are you getting involved at all in that? Or are you just watching and see what happens and work around it?
Yeah, I'm watching, see what happens and work around it, right? So you can build a very strong kind of pipeline generating system without breaking laws. But I also don't want to be the most compliant guy who loses, right? So this is why being a lawyer, right? I understand the landscape really well, right? I understand like what's allowed, right? What's not allowed, and how you can play in a gray area.
Right. Because it is gray. Like for those who don't understand law, and you're a lawyer, you know more than me. I took one law class, but I do understand that laws are not very black and white, and they're open to interpretation. And that's the key point, is that you can read a law or a piece of legislation and you could interpret it many different ways. And that's why lawyers and litigation comes into play. It's like, no, well, I'm reading it this way, and you could say I'm reading it that way. And so you know how to dance that line and how to take some risk without overexposing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I'm keeping my ear close to the ground to understand basically what's happening generally in the industry. And then we will adapt and kind of build out a functionality. It's not rocket science. Like at this point of time, kind of voice and kind of LinkedIn automation, it's basically something you can kind of build out of the box and launch probably kind of in a month. It's not rocket science. So the question is only kind of how to do it well and not to get into hot water.
This makes sense. And so, okay, so that covers the legal piece of it, which is it's a bit of an unknown today. We do anticipate regulation. I think this is going to be a big topic for the next, whoever comes into the White House next over the next 4 years is going to be a big topic, right? They're going to have to navigate, although it'll take time. It's going to take a lot of time, but regulating AI in general, I mean, they're talking about universal basic income. They already have all these different conversations going on. So it is going to be a hot topic. But let's jump into the next piece you mentioned here. And this will tie into a little bit of what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But sounds like what you're focusing on today are teams that have full cycle reps. So they don't necessarily have a dedicated outbound team or an SDR team. They have full cycle reps who ideally are spending most of their time running demos, but in between demos, they're doing some of their own prospecting. And I think everyone knows how that goes. Usually you want to do as little prospecting as humanly possible. You want to be on demos all day. You don't really want to be cold calling and sending off emails. And so this is a tool today where you're saying this sort of works as a companion to that full cycle AE to essentially lift up their numbers and give them some cushion without making the big investment into hiring a bunch of human SDRs. Is that right?
Yes, but that's not the only use case, right? Two other use cases that we see quite often is basically companies that have a team of kind of like 2, 3 SDRs. They understand what they are doing. They want to scale the outreach. They want to book more demos without scaling the headcount. And then the third use case is actually companies that have very large TAMs or very high inbound flow, and they don't have enough kind of people to work through all of that audience from marketing perspective, right? So AI SDR is conversational, right? So it can not only write one-way emails, it can answer follow-up questions, it can ask questions, and based on your answers, can decide what to do next. And and therefore, it's great for inbound lead qualification, nurturing, event follow-up, post-event follow-up, event invites, booking meetings at a conference. So it's a very powerful marketing tool.
So how does it compare? Do you have scenarios today where you have customers who have outbound SDRs, they're doing the regular, outbound process through, I don't know, SalesLoft or outreach, they're doing sort of the traditional playbook, and then they also bring in AI SDR and you're able to literally compare like apples to apples, the metrics? Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah. So an SDR who is multi-threading through cold call, email, etc., usually books 3 times more meetings than an email-only AI SDR. So essentially, if you're saying like, hey, my human SDR is booking like 6 meetings a month, right? AI SDR would be booking probably 2, 3 email only. So multi-threading gives you that lift, right? That we don't have inside our software yet.
Do you have a sense of the quality? And that makes sense, by the way. That's not a terrible difference, right? Especially because you're going to spend significantly more. I'm sure it's more than 3 times more the spend to hire the human sellers. Okay, that makes sense. I want to backtrack for a second. You mentioned AI buyer, and I just want to add a thought here because I do think this is something that people need to be thinking about and be prepared for because it's going to change the way that people buy. And if I understood what you said correctly, it's something that I've been saying for a while now as well, which is that buyers already don't want to deal with salespeople. They generally want to get as far through the sales process as they possibly can on their own. If they can self-sign up, they want this. They don't want to have to talk to someone who is biased, who has a financial incentive to push them in one direction, and who's going to keep pestering them, following up, and, sort of harassing them, for lack of a better word, to getting them to sign up. And so if they can go on the internet and watch videos and read articles and gather a bunch of information and sort of wrap their head around the competitive landscape before speaking to someone, that's what they're doing. And what you mentioned, I think, is what I've been talking about, which is soon there's going to just be an AI that really makes that whole process simple. And maybe it's ChatGPT, probably it's something like ChatGPT that's specifically built for shopping for software so that you go in there as a buyer and you just say, I'm looking for a sales CRM. Here are my details of my company, and here's my budget, and here's the things that are important to me. Tell me my options. And it's going to basically spit out a beautiful report for you. Now, of course, we're going to have to deal with who's the company behind that. What's their bias, right? Are they have the same investors as HubSpot and not Salesforce? And now they're going to push you towards, using HubSpot and all this sort of stuff. And so we're going to enter a whole new world of bias when it comes to those sort of AI solutions. But I do think that it will quickly become the norm in the same way that running a Google search became the norm when internet search became popular. It used to be, and I love thinking back to this, but when I was in high school or middle school and would have a debate with one of our friends about a topic, we didn't have the internet really to go as a reference to source of truth. We would say like, all right, we're going to ask Mr. Jones on Monday in first period, and he's going to be the delineation of this debate here. And it's not like that anymore. Now you just pull out your phone, you get an answer real fast. And so those buying behaviors are changing drastically. And as AI becomes more reliable and hopefully less biased over time, it's going to be the natural course of action that we're going to source information from AI. And so I'll throw in one tip that I think companies need to do to prepare for that is to actually publish a lot of deep knowledge about your product, because AI is going to ingest that information. And if you're not publishing a lot about your demos, about your features, about everything that it uses, well, there's nowhere it's going to be able to gather that intelligence, right? Maybe we'll have systems we get to actually feed our demos into someday. But in the meantime, if you're not publishing things and you're sort of keeping everything behind a gate or a firewall, then you're going to be the last one ChatGPT is going to mention, because it's not scraping anything about your product. So I think that's one thing that people can do to sort of prepare for that. But the human threading is really where we're seeing the advantage today, which makes sense. I'm curious if you have the exact numbers. Can you give us what the average open rate or reply rate is when running, through AI SDR, or does it vary a lot across different customers?
Varies a lot across different customers. But in terms of open rate, usually it's higher than 40% Very often it's gonna even higher than 50% because we take care of deliverability properly, right? So we basically set up mailboxes, we warm them up, we kind of configure everything properly, and we manage them for you. We set it in very low volumes, like not more than 30 emails per mailbox per day. So we take care of those things so emails do land in the inbox. And then we also take care of the subject lines, which are AI generated and usually referencing something they recently said on LinkedIn. So when you get that email, you're like, this is really something I talked about, right? Let's see what's it about. We had also some outliers, right? So kind of my AI video campaign had like an 80% open rate. We have customers who have like 60, 70% open rate, but almost no one has like below 40%, except in cases where it's like a hyper competitive industry where nobody really opens emails anymore, like software development outsourcing, like very difficult.
And they'd probably have the same problem if they're sending those manually anyway.
Oh, much worse, right?
Because you're going to be consistent, at least with your strategy. So, okay, so that makes sense. So you're at least as good, probably better on the open rate because you're going to be consistent. And you're really, a human's going to sort of get lazy, maybe mix in some junk along the way. But once you've mastered sort of that recipe, it's just rinse and repeat, which makes sense. It really shouldn't, on the receiving end, they don't know that you're an AI. So it really shouldn't impact the open rate in that regard, as long as you're replicating what a human does. So that makes sense. What about response rates? And I don't know if you're following sort of the first response to the second response and how deep those conversations are engaging. How are you seeing that sort of play out in comparison to the human outbound salesperson?
Again, it depends. And it also depends for a human outbound salesperson, right? So we have some that perform really well, some that don't. So kind of median, what we see, it's around kind of 4% reply rate. And out of that, we would see 1 to 2% positive reply rate. So that is the median. We have a meaningful number of outliers, right? Who have like 5, 6, 7, 8% reply rates, and kind of positive are like 3, 4, 5 out of those. And again, in reply rates, I'm not counting anything that's automated, right? So we're not counting out of offices, we're not counting unsubscribes, we're not counting bounces, although we almost don't get those because we triple clean all the contacts, right? So those are just replies that are not positive, like, hey, we're using a competitor, which you still can work with. And our AI does work with those, handling objection and trying to kind of convert.
Got it. I'm going to throw in one sort of side question here. Is Google or Gmail or Outlook, have you seen any effort on their part specifically to try to block what you're doing? I know they've changed a lot of their sort of, requirements, and people can't send as many emails now, and they're sort of cracking down on outbound in that regard. Have you seen any efforts that are specifically targeting the AiSDR or no?
Not yet. I think it's pretty difficult to kind of detect that this is kind of an AI generated email. Honestly, most of our emails are much better than kind of most of the cold emails that I get. And let's see, this is one of the risks I kind of curious about and anticipate, but nothing happened so far.
Okay. Well, that's a good sign. And I would imagine if whatever was going to happen in that regard probably already been triggered by SalesLoft and Outreach, right? Because they sort of blew up everyone's inboxes by making that process so easy. So yeah, to your point, you're probably on average producing a better quality email, because when you take the average, you get all the bad salespeople that are writing bad emails. You're not doing that. You're replicating the best. And so maybe there's some areas where it's not as good, but on average, it's going to be generally better, I would imagine, in that regard, at least for the cold email. Are you able to disclose, I don't know if you want to chat about your revenue, how many customers you guys are at, and sort of what your growth has been like? Are you able to dive into any of that?
So I can share that we have 80 customers currently, and we've been growing 25% months and months in terms of revenue for the past 2 months. But I would not kind of share revenue numbers publicly, things like that. I think that.
No, that's fine. I wanted to get a sense of
company.
It makes total sense. So that gives me a good sense of where you're at. So to be clear, you're still in the founder-led sales stage. Are you the one pitching and closing all of the deals today?
Most of them. I have a few other non-sales team members helping me, but we're still very much in the founder-led sales stage on purpose. I still understand that we haven't figured it all out yet, right? The demand is very strong because people want to sell without doing much work, right? Like people want this a lot.
People want magical pipeline. If you can make that promise, they will at least pay to try it. Yes.
Exactly, right? And I, as a second-time founder, I have very clear distinction between what people want and what we actually deliver. And people want guaranteed booked meetings. And we cannot do that yet because AI can scale what works, but we cannot figure out your product market fit. We cannot figure out your audience messaging fit, right? Sometimes we cannot build a perfect lead list for you, right? AiSDR is really advanced compared to other players in the space and just using plain Apollo because we have kind of hiring intent, company research on like web research and then news and things like that. So you can find more relevant leads, but we also have limitations. Just a few days ago, I had a call with a prospect who was selling into restaurants and they needed to find phone numbers of restaurants of the specific size and the specific location. Like, no way I can do that. So I understand my limitations and I want to make sure that I stay close to the customers for as long as I can afford to build a product that they really want and will buy and stay for a long periods of time because they love it and because it delivers value. And this is why I'm doing still founder-led sales. And this is why I'm not gonna running around raising like a mega round with my existing traction because I want to make sure that I built a product that people want, not a product that people want, but it's actually not that, right? But a product that people really want. So that's why I'm doing founder-led sales.
Well, makes sense. And I completely agree with that approach. And you may be in this phase for longer than your average startup because it's so new. You're not just sort of figuring out a new product, you're figuring out a whole new space, a whole new piece of technology, a whole new application of it. And that's going to require you being really close to the customers for quite some time, even if you're not closing every deal, but you're going to probably want to be involved speaking to every customer for a while. And so I think you're doing the right thing. I mean, I would, if I were in your shoes, I would rather close fewer deals and be involved in all of them than to be 2xing my sales today and be out of the picture because your product's going to turn out to be much better if you're involved with every customer today. So you're hitting the nail on the head with that. What does your sales process look like today? Are you mostly like, hey, try it and see if it sells itself? And if they really like the results, then that's a good customer to bring on board? Or are you also pushing in areas, to sort of bring in risky customers? And what's your thought there? When I sell products like that, I can compare to sort of AirCall is we always wanted to put everyone through a free trial because we wanted to make sure that they were at least remotely satisfied before we brought them in as a customer. I'm curious if you're taking a similar approach or if you really want to bring everyone in for all the different types of feedback you'll get.
So no, right? We try to kind of bring in the customers who would be the best fit, right? But I don't do that through free trial because there are two elements to it. First one is cost, right? So we have meaningful data and AI costs for every customer we onboard and can send. But the other one, much more important, is perceived value, right? The perceived value of free trial is zero. We experimented with free trial and we offered free trial to like 20 companies or something. All of them were super interested and engaged on the demo. Less than half of them onboarded into a free trial. And very few of them, I think two, launched their first campaign in the free trial. And then nobody eventually kind of closed, not because the product didn't work, but because they didn't even care to invest a meaningful amount of effort to make it work, right? And we helped, we communicated, we had a Slack channel, kind of very assisted approach. But because it's free, you have much more important things to do than figure out kind of something with a free product. So everyone we onboard on a paid subscription basis, but we give an easy way out, which is a month-to-month contract. So you can pay us $750, send 1,000 emails, you will have full onboarding, dedicated customer success manager, and then you'll know that kind of it didn't work because it doesn't work for you and not because something went wrong, right? And the way I kind of filter for people who may not be successful with our product and companies who may not be successful is by being very honest, right? Companies come to the call and say like, hey, this is what we want. We never done outbound before. We want to try outbound. We want to do this with AI here. I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work for you because this is what we do. Being able to find relevant leads, creating highly relevant messaging, taking care of the deliverability, handling responses automatically. But if you don't know your messaging and your audience, because you've never done outbound before, I'm not sure it's going to work for you, right? We even don't know if email is the right channel for your communication in your industry. And despite all that, people say like, well, I still like this. A lot of things getting right here. I want to try. And then they subscribe. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Similarly, I had a call just yesterday where I do a lot of discovery, right? So I ask them like, what is your current process? How do you book meetings? Things like that. And they tell me like, this is how we build our lists. And then we call into those lists. And I'm like, great. Like I cannot build the list that you're looking for. And I cannot do calls. So I don't think I'm going to be a good fit. And they're like, okay, thank you for your honesty. What can you do? I'm like, this is what I can do. This is potentially how it could work for you. And they say, this is great. This could work for us for kind of email marketing and nurturing and other use cases, but it's not what we're looking for today. So let's talk later. This is a good scenario for me, right? Where I really understood what the customer needs and then was able to kind of map it to what we can do and then have an honest conversation. And that's what I do on all my sales calls.
How long does implementation take? If I signed up today, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my day to this. Can I be set up and running by tomorrow? Or is this a week-long plus process?
If you have sending mailboxes ready, you can be up and running by the end of the day today. If you don't have sending mailboxes ready, we have to buy those, set those up, warm them up. It will take at least a week.
Got it. So that's the big barrier for free trials being a real smooth process, it sounds like.
Yes, that
Got
as
it.
well.
That makes a lot of sense. I would say if you do evolve to a place where, and it may just not be possible with the inboxes, but I would think if there was a way to have a free trial of this that was just sort of really seamless to get set up on, that people would do it. My guess is they're running into that barrier right there. And that's probably where, you're not going to get them. And now just to set expectations, free trials, they're not all always good. And when you offer a process like that, a percentage of them is going to be complete junk. I mean, you're looking for the ones that actually are good, but sounds like you're doing the right thing here because you need to kind of hold their hand through this process. And you want to make sure that if they're going to try it, that they're invested in actually doing it and following through. Whereas with free trials, the common problem is that they're not invested in it and it's not a priority and it sort of gets brushed under the rug. At AirCall, it was different. We had to make sure that the call quality was acceptable for them. And this could vary based on their internet speed or the type of equipment they use. And setting up that free trial was really quick and easy because they all just had to log in and then they could make a few calls and make sure the phone worked well. And that was a great part of our sales process because usually they were coming to us because they were not happy with the quality of their current call. And so we were like, okay, we'll just set it up and try it. And if you are, like, sales closed, right? Like it's that easy.
Yeah.
For you, it's a different process. It's not that simple. There's not sort of that one thing they're looking to check. And if they have to set up these inboxes, then it sounds like a free trial is going to be tough to do there.
There is one thing they're coming to us for, booked meeting.
Right. But if you have to set up those inboxes, it's not sort of like a 2-click free trial, like just set it up and try it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's still cold outbound. It takes time. It takes volume, right? Even if you're writing the best emails in the world, it's the free trial motion for this is challenging, at least for now. I still have it in mind, or at least a version of it, but it's not there.
It's probably much later stage if that even becomes a necessity. It really only makes sense when the demand is so extreme and people are just looking to jump in the product and you're at the point where you know that they can self-serve and once they use it, it sort of sells itself. That's really when these free trials make sense. So it makes sense to me what you're doing. I think that's the right way to approach this. And then you can sort of manage expectations along the way and also make sure you're getting all that feedback. Because that's another thing with the free trial is you lose a lot of that feedback because you're not in the loop on every sort of every phase there. Okay. Next question. What's the main roadblock today? Would it be the multi-threading? Would it be that you would hope that AiSDR can do conversational voice AI? What's that one big thing that you're like, when we can overcome this, it sort of unlocks the big road ahead?
Product market fit for our customers. If we can, and this is something I'm actually working on, if we can find a way to basically onboard any customer who has no idea about sales, no idea about messaging, audience they're going to go after, and give them 3-5 hypotheses, good hypothesis about like how you can sell this product and then execute on them, we will book meetings. But that level of insight is close to an agency. It's like a super kind of GTM agency where anyone can come to, and then you will have a team of experts who've been doing this 10 years, and then they will give ideas on how to sell your product that you have never sold before, right? So doing this in a scalable, fast way is going to be a huge unlock. Because then essentially what you can do, you can say like, hey, you're a small company, like you have 10 people, you've never done sales, you don't know what to do. We can help you because with us, you have a fully kind of technologically enabled best practice SDR sales outreach GTM engine on one platform.
Got it. Who would you say are the legitimate competitors today? Who's worth keeping an eye on? Who are you selling against today?
So those are two different questions, right? Because in terms of selling against, it's surprisingly rare that we actually come across kind of competitors in one-to-one deals. Like when companies are considering multiple AI SDRs, and we're one of those.
That'll change over time, I would imagine, right?
I think so, right? But I'm actually quite surprised why it's not happening yet, right? I'm quite surprised.
If I had to guess, I would say some of that has to do with actually how you've branded your company so effectively. By naming it AiSDR, you have sort of taken ownership over the category. And I would imagine that there's a level of perception that if you want to get a tool that's going to be an AiSDR, that it almost feels like you're dealing with the main source. And I think that's very effective branding. And there may be some psychological, sort of influence going on there that's like, this is the one to try. That said, as it happens with all SaaS, if you're onto a great idea, which I'm sure you are, and this is going to grow into something, it will attract a lot of competition. And, consider it a good thing today that, you're not selling directly against people, but the sooner you catch product market fit, the sooner someone else will either copy you or figure it out at the same time. So those days are coming for sure, but that's not a bad thing.
No, that's true, right? It's surprising to me because there are competitors, right? So for example, the company that I'm watching is 11x AI. So they are in the AI workforce kind of space, and we are kind of competing on one product, which is the sales, the SDR, right? I have more vertical kind of vision of this product, right? So we want to go deep in sales, so maybe cover more stages of sales over time. Artisan comes across often, but maybe it's because I'm a YC company. And again, kind of purely based on kind of LinkedIn. Very rarely we see this in actual sales deals. And then I used to be following OneShot.ai, but I'm not seeing them that often. And I know that there are other companies that exist like Lizard or SalesScale, but I've never heard of them, or Piper from Qualified, but I've never heard of them outside of LinkedIn.
How helpful has Y Combinator been? Did they help to steer you in this direction and in finding sort of this type of AI to build? Or when you went to Y Combinator, did you already have the plan in place?
No, I had a plan in place, right? But Y Combinator has been the most transformative experience in my life twice now, right? So with my first company, it kind of changed the trajectory. And with my second company, the fact of being a Y Combinator company alone gives you a credit of trust that many other companies just don't have. And obviously opens you up to the best investors in the world and kind of sets you up on the trajectory of hypergrowth, right? So I've been very lucky to be the YC alumna twice, right? And go through that experience. And I recommend it to every single person that asks me, like, should I apply? Like, or what accelerator should I go to? So super evangelist.
Well, that's reassuring for advice that I've been giving, particularly to founders who are looking to start AI companies. I could be wrong, but my gut tells me that Y Combinator is sort of playing as like the gatekeeper of AI in a sense, in that there's so much that's going to be built and developed over the coming years that if there isn't some means of consolidating these ideas, there's going to be just a lot of the same stuff out there and a lot of duplication and a lot of people probably trying to hack together something that already someone's building like a world-class version of. And I could be wrong, but it seems to me that Y Combinator is a great place to go with your early idea because they can help steer you. They know enough to say, well, there's 10 people already building this, like, but you've got something good here. Like maybe you want to go in this direction because there's a big gap in the market. And it feels like they're helping to make sure that the top talent in the AI space are actually building things that the world needs rather than a bunch of, money getting poured into building a bunch of sort of overlapping or competing solutions. So particularly for early stage founders in the AI space, I've been saying you probably want that level of mentorship because they know things you don't know. I mean, when we're dealing with OpenAI OpenAI and, a lot of this technology is coming through the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. These are government and private sector partnerships that most people don't know anything about. And they just think that OpenAI just invented this thing a couple months ago and it just came out of nowhere. Like, no, that's not how it works. This stuff has been under development, under lock and key of the gov for a long time. It's probably been used behind the scenes to write presidential speeches for the last couple decades. I mean, it's been used on us and in military application for far longer than it's been introduced to us. And when you understand that that's sort of the backbone of a lot of this tech, you know that it's a bit more organized than it may actually seem. And that's going to tie into the regulations, going to tie into the fundraising. It's going to tie into where investors are putting their money because they want to make sure that what you're building actually plays a part of this sort of grander, bigger vision, so to speak. And I've kind of pinned, OpenAI, Y Combinator. These are the places that seem to be sort of steering that ship. And I would imagine they have some level of security clearance with the government, and that's how they're helping to position all of this. And so I think it would be very foolish for people not to consider the mere fact that there's a lot of secrecy behind a lot of this technology that is just coming to light, right, as it's been given to the public, so to speak. But what we need to consider is that there are people who have been working on this far longer than the public has known about it. And that's something worth trying to get involved in those circles as best you can to sort of help guide you and steer you. We covered a little bit of this, but I want to make sure we have just a very crystal clear answer. Who should and should not be using AiSDR today? I think we got a fairly clear answer, but if you want to summarize that just so we're clear.
So a company that has a bunch of full cycle reps who wants to give them more time to kind of build pipeline, a company who has a couple of SDRs and has been successful with outbound before, who wants to scale it without scaling the headcount, and a company who wants to try higher converting, more innovative approaches in email marketing, either for nurturing, qualifying inbound leads or following up before or after events, webinars, things like that. Those are the ones that should definitely be using AiSDR. The one that may use it, but there is no kind of guarantee that it's actually going to work, is companies who have never done email outbound before, don't know what they are selling, and think that the AI will figure it out for them, because it's not exactly how it works.
Got it. So if you have a proven outbound process, this is a great way to pour fuel on the fire, whether it's just teeing up some extra potential leads for your full cycle reps or helping to supplement some of the outbound that you're already doing, or maybe you want to test some new strategies and you don't want to bring in some more humans to do that right away. Whereas the people who might want to think twice is if they haven't proven any of that to be true today. Would you recommend to them, hey, just try it and see if it works? Or do you say, hey, you should probably have some humans try to prove out an outbound process first?
I usually recommend them to prove out the outbound process first.
Got it. And that's good for you because it gives you a baseline to say, hey, we can't really consider this a failure because you've never even proven that it could be done with a human for your company. Now, granted, if they're selling something where there's a competitor on the market who we already know does outbound, it's very similar, you can kind of make that assumption. But okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially during your founder-led stage where you want to really prioritize working with the right companies as well. That leads us to the last question, which is, what does the future hold? What do you see? Are you thinking, hey, someday we're going to make AI AE? Or is there a grand vision for where this all comes together and where it ends? Or is the grand vision maybe it does become an AI AE someday and it grows that big?
No, I don't think there will be AI AE, at least for now, right? But I think the portion of the market that is fully automated, kind of self-serve, it's going to grow. The ACV of the kind of self-serve contracts is going to grow because something that's becoming possible is AI demos. So instead of talking to a human, you can jump and talk to a video AI, ask them questions, and they will not pitch. They will just answer. And this is basically an advanced version of like doing your research on the website. And this will increase the ACV that can be kind of fully automated. This is also going to be the place where AI SDRs are going to thrive. Fully automated outreach leading to a fully automated sale because the increased ACV and the lower cost of AI SDR compared to a human SDR will make the unit economic work. And then there will be the mid-market where kind of AI SDRs will be generating the meetings but then people will be taking those meetings and asking the questions, qualifying, things like that. And those will be more advanced AI SDRs doing more research, doing more personalized, multi-touch, multi-threaded outreach. And then there will be still kind of full human outreach that will be signing 6-7 figure deals because that's just human nature. But then I'm also a huge believer in the AI buyer part of things that will also kind of work for that lowest segment and a little bit for that mid-market segment. That's what I believe is going to be the future of sales. Let's see how it plays out. Maybe I'm too optimistic, too futuristic, but this is where I see things going.
To clarify, are you saying that you foresee AI SDR in the future will be able to run some sort of a demo?
So the technology exists already to enable that.
Yes.
I haven't decided if we're going to move in that direction yet because there is no customer demand for that just yet.
Right.
But I expect that it may happen and then we will build it.
Got it. Okay. So that excites me. And that does kind of turn into AI, AE. But I guess really the concept is you get them so much further through the process before they need to speak to an AE. And so if you're going back and forth on a couple automated emails and they want to see a demo, there could be an environment where they jump into some iframe window where it asks them a few questions. And then what you have behind the scenes, a bunch of pre-recorded demo segments of every feature or every topic. And then you compile together sort of a custom integration of those segments. And that's the tech that I know exists. Like that's out there in the world. I have not seen it very well applied to this problem today. I've seen some people take stabs at it. And I think part of the problem is that the buyers maybe aren't totally ready for it yet. But as we start to see sort of this graduation of Gen X and baby boomer decision makers getting sort of overtaken by the millennials and the Gen Zs, I think that's where dealing with an automated demo process might probably have some better traction and the tech will sort of, pick up to speed there as well. But particularly the younger generation today, they go to their Snapchat AI bot and they ask questions and they say, I'm having this fight with my boyfriend. What do I do? And so they're already doing that. And so I think they're going to expect the same when they get into their professional lives and they start buying things. That's going to feel natural to them. Whereas today, you're pushing against the grain to try to push that on a Gen X or baby boomer buyer who hasn't grown up talking to their Snap bot all day. So I think there's a bright future ahead with that as well. Glad to hear that you're thinking about it. Thank you so much for joining me. Where can people check you out? It's AiSDR.com is the URL. I know you're on LinkedIn, so everyone should follow you on LinkedIn. You've been sharing some great stuff. Are you also on Twitter? Are you anywhere else?
No, only on LinkedIn for now.
Okay, so check them out on LinkedIn and then check out AiSDR.com. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.